Welcome everyone to the M360 Security and Industries. I'm Samantha Kite, the Head of Industry Security, and it's great to have you here today. I'd also like to say a particular thank you to our sponsors for supporting this event. We have a great lineup over the next 2 days, and we've assembled a group of speakers and panelists with a wealth of experience from across the ecosystem. This is to help us all think about how we can strengthen collaboration between telco, security, and the verticals. So without further delay, please let me introduce you to the Director General of the GSMA, Mats Granryd.
Thank you, Sam. It is an absolute pleasure to be here today. I don't know if can you hear me? Yeah, okay, good. And I'm sorry, but I do need some glasses these days. It's pretty sad, but that's the way the world is going. So this is our first M360 event here in the UK, and the first ever security and industry event. And as I said, it is so good to see so many people here, and it's such an important topic. As we know, this year we celebrate 50 years since the first mobile phone call was made. That phone was almost as big as a shoebox, took sort of 10 hours to charge, and you can speak for a whopping 30 minutes or so, or 35 minutes maybe. So it is pretty amazing how far we have come in these short 50 years. Today, mobile broadband network covers 95% of the population, and we serve 5.4 billion people globally. So over the past 50 years, our industry has completely changed the world, unlocking the power of connectivity for almost 70% of the population. That's the 5.4 billion, over 8 billion people, and enabling digital transformation on a scale that has never been seen before. Which, with each new generation of connectivity, the rate of adoption grows faster and faster, and doors open to even greater opportunities. But think about this. It took 12 years for 3G to reach 1 billion customers. But last year, just 3 years after the launch of 5G reached the same billion people. I find that quite amazing. Today, over 230 mobile operators in 90 markets have launched commercial 5G services. And this year, we expect 30 new markets to launch. 5G is truly gathering pace. We know that, and we can clearly see the benefits. By 2030, we expect that 5G will add nearly $1 trillion to global GDP. And it's all down to fostering partnerships between different sectors and businesses and jointly grow the opportunity. From automotive to aviation, to education, to entertainment, manufacturing to metaverse. Mobile connectivity has this massive enablement effect. As connectivity becomes even more fundamental to our daily lives, it brings opportunities, as I said, but it also brings risks. In this interconnected world, we must ensure that what we do is as secure and safe as possible at all times. Now, that is a key focus for us at GSMA. As the Global Mobile Industry Association, we sit in a unique position to bring together mobile operators and ecosystem partners, to define industry specifications, to promote industry fraud and security awareness, and to assess, analyze, and report on the industry threat landscape. And recently, we launched the GSMA Mobile Cybersecurity Knowledge Base, developed in consultation with industry experts from across the ecosystem and public sources like 3GPP, ENISA, and NIST. Working together, we conducted a comprehensive threat analysis, identifying and understanding the security threats posed by 5G networks, and providing best practices on appropriate and effective security controls to mitigate those risks. When we look to the future, now this kind of collaboration across industries and verticals is going to be absolutely vital to building safe and sustainable ecosystem for us all to enjoy. There really is no question about it. connectivity is deeply embedded in our everyday lives. And as technology advances faster, we need to keep working together to evolve and adapt to the changing needs of our customers and the world around us. You see, in all of the uncertainty that we face today, the one thing that I am absolutely certain about is that connectivity has never been more important. For over 30 years, the mobile industry has been at the forefront of connectivity. Well, we have connected the world. Innovation, by tackling some of the biggest challenges that our world is facing. And security and safety, by working diligently to understand threats and mitigate risks. And as those security threats shifts and changes, just as technology itself does, we are constantly reinforcing our efforts. So we can all understand how important this conference really is. Now, the good thing is that we have 3 right out of 3 possible. We have the right people. Well, that's you in the room. That's the first right. The second right is the setting. We're at GSMA, we're in London. That's the second right. And the third right is that the time is now, and that's why we are here. So with those words, thank you very much for coming. Enjoy the show and please contribute. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Mats, for opening the event. Next, I'd like to introduce our keynote, the Director of Products and Services at Vodafone Business. Please give a warm welcome to Giorgio Migliarina.
Good morning, and thank you very much for taking the time and being here today. I'm delighted to be at the GSMA today. As a way of introduction, I'm Director of Global Products and Services for Vodafone Business. Vodafone Business is the business unit within Vodafone that deals with all businesses and public sector customers, from the micro businesses and sole traders all the way to the largest MNCs and government institutions. If you don't consider micro businesses and sole traders, and if you consider just the small and medium enterprises and governments, we serve millions of SMEs, and we serve hundreds of thousands of MNCs, large government institutions, and large national institutions. About 1.5 years ago, we changed our business model for products, and we centralized the management of all products and services that are not related to legacy connectivity, mobile and fixed, that are still managed by our operating companies. So this kind of change happened for 2 reasons. The first one is we can, of course, leverage economies of scale driven by the fact that we can invest and roll out globally products. But secondly, there are also similarities in terms of needs of these customers, companies, large and small, across all operating companies and all markets. And this is what I would like to talk to you about today, because sitting on a point of view that enables us to actually look at millions of customers, we can actually see what are the current trends and the current pain points in the security business. And this is what we are going to talk about today. We are going to talk about security. Now, if we look at security from an outside-in perspective, we see a lot of points of failure. First of all, the number of attacks are increasing, and they are not getting easier to counteract. For example, 65% of ransomware victims get their data back, but 35% don't. If you decide to pay, in 80% of the cases, you probably are attacked again. If you take the European Union has about 30 million companies, from, again, the micro business all the way to the large enterprise. Of these 30 million, 20 million, 2/3, admit that they don't know whom to call in terms of getting their own security advice. And 1/3 of these, about 7 million, also admit that they don't have any security system to protect them. If you want to invest in security, that is also quite complicated because a large enterprise, on average, has 76 systems protecting them. And a small and medium enterprise has about 15. So you need to put together and integrate many, many systems just to have a full protection. I think the industry itself doesn't help because by the latest numbers of cybersecurity vendors that you have in the world, we have about 3,200 vendors, and they are spread across 17 categories of security threats and solutions. So even if you are a small and medium enterprise, you really need to put a lot of effort in trying to understand how to protect yourself. And probably by now, so I started talking just a few minutes ago, given the current trends, about 30 companies have been attacked, and with a potential cost for them of in excess of £100,000. So in this kind of environment, I believe that telcos are quite uniquely placed to help companies. Why? First of all, because if you take into account if you want the proliferation of applications, clouds, and so on, a lot of over-the-top providers, they look at the customer-to-application environment. But this only covers a subset of what companies need to worry about. Operators, on the other side, have an end-to-end system view because we actually touch mobile devices, we touch CPEs in the offices, we touch connectivity, we understand what are the elements in the cloud that needs to be secured, all the way to applications. So operators can actually play a very important role in integrating this complexity and this fragmentation in the industry and provide, or at least attempt to provide, a single point of contact for companies big and small for security. Now, we need to act now. The reason for that is the attack surface is definitely getting bigger and bigger. This is also the result of the great efforts that we as an industry have put into technology. Now the barriers to adoption for new technologies for a company is getting smaller and smaller. And with IoT and 5G, the ability to connect devices, locations, and people, of course, is increasing, but also the points of threats are increasing as well. So we need quite a lot of attention to that. Secondly, of course, with remote working, the cloud, and so on, now there is a much more dynamic environment. Protecting a location using a firewall doesn't apply anymore. Thirdly, people remain the primary threat vector. And this is also very important because 80% of the attacks are usually done with valid credentials. So where do you find your credentials and how people are behaving? This is very important because sometimes we are all behaving not in the most thoughtful way when it comes to password and credential ourselves. And we need to act now because in theory we should have already acted yesterday and the day before. We haven't necessarily come together as an industry to bring more simplicity, especially to the mid-size enterprises. And therefore, we need to do that today. Just for you to know, 98% of companies are mid-size. 98% of companies have up to 49 employees. So these companies don't have a CTO, they don't have a chief security officer, and they rely on third parties like us to provide the support. Now, what can we do? I think we can focus on three control points that as an operator or as operators, we can actually control quite well. The first one is the user. The user is the fundamental building block of companies and businesses, of course, but they usually act across a multitude of devices, across a multitude of locations, and they also have a specific set of habits and dynamics in terms of how to interact with data. We need to double down on identity, controls on privacy, and also looking at how we can secure device, data, applications all around the user. Second point is connection and connectivity. I think Mats was saying connectivity is at the center of everything. This is absolutely true. And here we, of course, need to understand much better how the connectivity landscape has changed. Because again, before it was office to office, office to data center. Today is home to office to cloud in a much more dynamic environment. But this is our bread and butter as operators. So I think that we can actually integrate security into connectivity in a way that is definitely more easy to use than before. And the last point is about security operations. Now, security operation is something that every company should have. But this is more about if you are attacked as a company, do you know what to do? Do you know what is the first step, the second step? Do you know what kind of reaction you need to orchestrate? And a lot of companies don't know, and they wait until the first attack to find out as they go how they should prepare themselves. So I think that also for that, we need to start talking about our customers, about cyber resilience, about how to create a cyber operation team within their own companies, that they might not necessarily be expert, but they know whom to call when something goes wrong. And hopefully they already have called them before something goes wrong, so at least they are protected. But if you look at these elements, I think telcos are probably the only players in the ecosystem that are placed in a way that they can have visibility across all these, because we understand users, we can identify users, we have a lot of data about users themselves, we do connections, and at the same time we also have a lot of expertise in treating security ourselves as a large corporation or as large corporations. So I think we have a role to play to ensure that there are more and more companies that are getting protected. Now, let me give you an example of how that can work. So this is an example from a team that is in the Product and Services organization. It's the Vodafone Identity Hub. So this team has created a platform, a security platform that is API-based, that is based, by the way, on the GSMA Open Standards Mobile Connect. And we are using that to provide a set of functions that then can be used with industry verticals to address specific issues. So some of the examples are APIs or functions like matching, so matching the identity profile of our customers with their device-based or number-based identity. Call divert. If a call divert is on, you can actually potentially be prepared of a potential takeover from a third party of the communication. SIM swap, this is another very important alert that we can make available in real time. Number verify, and so on and so forth, right? Now, an example of how these kind of functions can work together with the industry is an application that we developed for the financial industry, for the banking industry. Now, every day in this country, there are about 4 million pounds being transacted from bank accounts in a fraudulent way. And that usually happens when somebody gets a call by somebody else impersonating the police, the tax authority, and convincing people on the phone that they need to have an urgent payment, otherwise something very bad could happen. And I'm pretty sure that some of you potentially may know people, maybe in your families or amongst your friends. Sometimes there are people that are more elderly and therefore they don't really necessarily understand very much these dynamics, that have received those calls, and based on that they actually made payments. Now, we worked with one of the biggest retail banks in the UK to understand how that could actually be correlated with the user, so the user behavior. And we discovered by going through about 20,000 such frauds that happened over a number of months, that there are very interesting correlations. The first correlation is that in 70% of the cases where there is a fraudulent transfer of money, the user was on the phone. So there was an active call going on a mobile phone, on their mobile phone. Secondly, this call was not a short call, But these users have been on the same call for several tens of minutes. So it was a long call. And if you combine this data, you can actually create additional information that the risk engines of the bank can take on board to prevent this kind of frauds. And when we put together these elements, we actually found out that we could actually increase to 100% the uplift of the ability to, of these risk systems to identify fraudulent situations and prevent them. So by doing that, we actually decreased significantly the amount of frauds, and we essentially wiped out the amount of frauds that were linked to the phone. So these are important findings that, of course, a single operator may facilitate, but it takes the whole ecosystem and the whole industry actually to ensure that these kind of services can be made available. But these are actually also showing you, while examples like these look at the user behavior, the connectivity, and also the kind of approach that you need to have as a company, in this case the bank, for their own customers, to bring together an approach that could defend their own users. And this is just one example. I think there are many use cases that we can work on as an industry. And I think these use cases are going to be industry specific, but most of them are big enough for us to devote time and resources to it. So, yeah, let me just summarize what we said today, excuse me. I think the industry is definitely not performing at its best. I think we have a lot of opportunities to make it much more easier for companies, big and small, to talk about security and to adopt securities. So our objective is to maximize the reach of security to companies of all sizes. In order to do that, today the industry is quite fragmented, but I think telecom operators are uniquely placed in the ecosystem to act as integrators, and at least at the beginning to mask the complexity of the security threats and systems that we need to set up. But we cannot do it alone, of course, so we need to work very much as a network of operator and as an industry, and at the same time involve all the security vendors in a way that can really bring all the full potential of this ecosystem together. And I'm sure that during today and tomorrow we will have many opportunities to discuss these details and even more. If you want to know something about the Vodafone Identity Hub, there is one colleague of mine tomorrow that is going to have a short presentation on that, Fraser King. So if you happen to be here tomorrow and if you're still interested, you can actually follow up. Thank you very much.